The voicemail was like a sledgehammer through glass. I stared at my phone, pulse racing, hands trembling. It couldn't be. Not after all this time. Marissa, hey, it's Declan. I'm back in town tonight and thought maybe I could crash at our place. We should talk. Our place. The nerve. I drew a ragged breath, gripping the countertop to steady myself. 3 years of rebuilding my life alone, brick by painful brick. 3 years of providing for our daughter while he gallivanted to find himself. And now he thought he could just waltz right back in? Mom, you okay? I blinked hard. Elise stood watching me cautiously, backpack slung over one small shoulder. I managed a shaky smile. Yeah, sweetheart. Go on, or you'll be late. After she left, I sagged against the refrigerator, waves of nausea and anger crashing over me. This wasn't happening. Not now, when Elise and I finally had stability. When I finally felt whole again. I replayed his message, bile rising. Make some space for me. Unbelievable. What about the space he'd left in our lives when he abandoned his family? When he disappeared without warning or child support? Did he expect me to forget so easily? To pretend our years of hardship hadn't happened? My hands curled into fists as tears burned my eyes. I swiped them away roughly. No. I was done crying over that man. I'd spent too many nights consoling our daughter when she asked where Daddy was, why he didn't love us anymore. Too many days working 2 jobs just to keep us afloat, selling memories to pay for groceries. My knuckles whitened, the anguish and self-doubt I'd endured when he vanished without explanation. It had nearly destroyed me. But Elise had needed me, so I'd carried on. Alone and exhausted, but carrying on nonetheless. And slowly, the wounds began to heal. The nights grew easier, my daughter's laughter more frequent. I gazed around my tidy kitchen, summoning the resolve that had held us together all this time. No, I would not let Declan unravel everything now. Not when we'd finally found stable ground. He gave up the right to be part of our lives long ago. I reached for the phone with quiet determination, deleted his message. Then I blocked his number. Whatever he wanted, neither Elise nor I owed him a moment more of our time or sanity. The past was done. I had a PTA meeting to plan for, parent conferences next week. A little girl who needed me focused and fully present. I straightened my shoulders, that familiar strength rooting into my bones once more. I slid the casserole into the oven, forehead creased in thought. Elise perched at the table coloring, ponytail bobbing as she hummed. Watching her, the familiar ache bloomed in my chest. She was the mirror image of Declan, those wide, dark eyes, the spray of freckles across her nose. Even her mannerisms echoed his, down to the way she chewed her lip when concentrating. My jaw tightened. He should be here sharing this scene, not off chasing self-serving dreams while his daughter grew up without a father. I'd spent endless hours listening to Elise wonder why Daddy didn't tuck her in at night or attend her school plays and piano recitals. Why he didn't want us anymore. When will Daddy visit? She'd asked endlessly those first bleak years, her small face etched with confusion. Doesn't he love me? And I could only gather her close, choking back angry tears as I whispered platitudes and smoothed her hair. Because how could I explain that her beloved father had thrown us aside without warning, that he'd left us drowning under a tidal wave of bills, our accounts bone dry? I still recalled removing her from ballet class in tears because the payments had become impossible. The shame and despair of those days haunted me. Yet despite it all, Elise's innocent faith in Declan persisted. Night after night, she'd gaze at the stars, making fervent wishes for his return. My heart fractured a little more with each tiny prayer. And now here he was, waltzing back as if no time had passed, acting as if he deserved access to our lives. I gritted my teeth, fury and bitterness roiling through me. What gave him the right after all the unanswered calls and attorney's letters demanding child support, which he'd ignored completely? Did he comprehend even an ounce of the agony he'd put us through? Elise glanced up just then, grinning broadly as she held up her drawing. Look, Mommy, it's you and me, and Daddy. Do you think he'll come visit for Christmas? My stomach twisted at the hope glowing from her sweet face. Gathering my composure with effort, I managed a tense smile. We'll have to wait and see, love. Now, want to help stir the corn? As she trailed behind me eagerly to the stove, I squared my shoulders with quiet resolve. Declan may believe he could resurrect his role as husband and father on a whim, but I would not stand by and let him trample our healing hearts again. I woke with a start, momentarily confused by the pre-dawn light filtering through the blinds. Then the memories came flooding back. Declan's message. His audacity after all this time. I groaned, scrubbing at my gritty eyes with the heels of my hands. Despite my exhaustion, sleep had eluded me most of the night. My mind kept voice conjuring emotions I thought I'd firmly buried. Anger, disbelief, the sting of that old betrayal. Sometime near dawn, I must have finally drifted off, too spent for my churning thoughts to keep at bay any longer. But now morning had arrived, heralding the start of another day I'd have to battle recurring ghosts. I dragged myself from bed, wincing at the throbbing behind my temples. In the muted light, I studied my reflection as I dressed for work. The drawn face staring back evoked the battered young woman I'd been in the aftermath of Declan's abandonment. The one who had cried herself to sleep for months, struggling to provide for a heartbroken little girl despite the yawning abyss where my savings used to be. I'd walked a tortuous road to regain my footing after he left. I couldn't resurrect that buried anguish now. Wouldn't. In the kitchen, I braced my hands against the smooth countertop, gathering my resolve. When Declan split, I'd eventually pick myself up and put one determined foot in front of the other until I could stand tall again. I owed it to myself and Elise to keep marching forward, not get dragged backwards by my ex-husband's latest whim. As I filled travel mugs with coffee, fury simmered through my veins. How dare he presume to still have any place in our lives? To believe he could breeze in and out whenever it suited him with no thought to those left scraping up the wreckage? No, I refused to permit it. Not this time. If Declan imagined he'd receive anything besides cold resentment from me, then reality would give him a brisk wake-up call. I would cordially inform him once that he'd extinguished any rights as a husband or father long ago. The aftermath was his mess to wade through. Elise wandered sleepy-eyed into the kitchen just then, her dark curls riotous. I smoothed them gently, heart clenching at her sweetness as I pressed a bowl of cereal into her hands. Whatever Declan's reasons for returning, I bore responsibility now for shielding my daughter from additional hurt. She'd endured enough confusion and disappointment already. This time I would guard the fragile new life we'd built, fortified by hard-won wisdom and resolve. Let Declan make his excuses elsewhere. When it came to my family, the door was firmly closed. I slid the key into the lock, balancing a bag of groceries on one hip. As the door swung open, I froze. There was Declan, sprawled on my living room sofa as if he belonged there. Watching TV and drinking a beer like this was any regular Tuesday night. The bag thudded to the floor. Declan glanced over, irritation flashing across his face. "Hey, careful with the bruise. Get out," I hissed through gritted teeth. Inside, emotions churned violently. "You have no right to be here." With exaggerated calm, Declan killed the TV and arched an eyebrow. "Is that any way to greet your husband after 3 years?" "Ex-husband," I spat. "Or did you miss the divorce paperwork while you were off finding yourself? Now get out before I call the police." Declan had the audacity to appear wounded. "Come on, Marissa. Can't we talk about this civilly? I've missed you two." A bitter laugh escaped my lips. "Missed us? Is that what you call completely abandoning your family? Refusing to help provide for your daughter even after the court-mandated child support?" Red-hot anger licked through me when he merely shrugged. I was in a tough financial spot myself, trying to get my business off the ground. And that justified leaving Elise and I destitute? My voice shook. For us to struggle just to survive while you gallivanted around pursuing your dreams? Declan's nonchalant mask slipped at the verbal slap, eyes narrowing dangerously. "Watch it, Marissa," he warned, crossing his arms. "You're one to talk anyway. Didn't take you long to replace me, now did it?" "Get out," I repeated through clenched teeth. I trembled with the urge to claw that smug expression off his face. "Whatever pathetic reasons you've conjured to explain abandoning your family, I don't want to hear them. It's too late. You're dead to us." Declan shot to his feet then, features twisting. For an instant, I thought he might get violent and tensed. But after a seething moment, he seemed to get himself under control. "You can play hardball all you want, but I'm back for good," he snarled. "We're still married in the eyes of God, even if you decided to throw away our sacred vows. Don't think this is over." He stormed out, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the windows. I jumped before sagging back against the wall, shaking all over. My pulse roared in my ears. This was bad. Declan had never handled not getting his way well, and by his behavior just now, he intended to make things very ugly before he gave up again. I had to protect Elise. Bereft of immediate options, I could only slide to the floor in front of the bolted door, head in hands. The peaceful life I'd rebuilt from ashes was crumbling before my eyes. And this time, I feared Declan himself posed the greatest threat to my daughter's well-being. I ushered Elise into the apartment, scanning the rooms cautiously. My spine prickled as I secured deadbolts and flipped lights, peering into shadowy corners, but the rooms appeared untouched. In the kitchen, I checked the locks on the back door and windows, pulse thrumming. Declan still had a key, and his words keep echoing through my mind. We're still married in God's eyes. This isn't over. A noise made me whirl. Elise hovered at the fridge, features pinched. Mom, what's going on? Why are you acting so weird? It's nothing, sweetie. I attempted a reassuring smile that felt more like a grimace. A worried 8-year-old didn't need to know her father had basically threatened us. Not yet, anyway. I started dinner preparations, jaw tight. Declan's reappearance had cracked open the fault lines I thought healed over. The security I'd rebuilt for Elise now threatened to crumble thanks to him barreling back in, all arrogant entitlement instead of remorse for his absence. After demolishing grilled cheese sandwiches, Elise wandered off to finish homework, subdued. My chest tightened watching her go. She'd already endured enough disappointment where her father was concerned. She deserved consistency and stability now, not Declan's melodrama and empty promises. As I washed up the supper dishes, resolve hardened my spine. Elise came first, period. For 3 years, I'd mastered that balance alone. Now the stakes were higher, but my commitment hadn't wavered. I would fiercely protect the peaceful life we'd carved out, even if confronting Declan's toxicity was inevitable to secure our safety. Right on cue, an insistent knock rattled the front door. I squared my shoulders and stalked through the living room as fury kindled in my chest. Tonight, Declan would receive his final warning. Either stay away for good or force my hand against him legally to guarantee Elise's well-being. I wrenched open the door, angry words dying on my lips. Declan sagged against the doorframe, clutching a mostly empty bottle of Jack Daniels. Behind him, the front yard was strewn with our overturned trash cans, contents scattered across dead grass. My heart sank at the spiteful spectacle. His bloodshot gaze raked over me, features twisting into an ugly sneer. "Hey there, gorgeous," he slurred. "Gonna invite your husband in for a drink?" His cackling laughter raised the hair on my arms. Disgust and alarm warred through me at his deteriorated state. Declan had always been a mean drunk, but this went beyond rational behavior. Had his years away unraveled him completely? Over his hulking shoulder, I registered our elderly neighbor, Mrs. Tavers, peering wide-eyed from her cracked door down the hall. Heart in my throat, I blocked Declan's lurching entry with my shoulder. "You need to leave," I warned sharply. "Now, before I call the police." His hand shot out, shoving me hard. I stumbled backwards with a gasp as he bowled his way inside, bottle dangling from one fist. Mrs. Tavers hastily shut her door. Declan invaded my space, liquor fumes and unhinged fury burning from him. "Get Elise. We're going home." I retreated slowly toward the kitchen, pulse thundering. No way would I let this monster near my daughter tonight. The baseball bat still leaned just inside the pantry. If persuasion failed, I knew with sudden cool clarity I would use it without hesitation. "Get back," I warned, fingers wrapped tightly around the bat's handle. Declan blinked slowly, swaying, his lip curled when he registered the weapon. "Gonna take a swing at me, Riss? Didn't peg you as the violent type." I angled my chin defiantly. "I'll do what it takes to protect my daughter. Now leave." His mocking grin faded. Belligerence hardened his eyes. "I told you we're going home. As a family." He took a threatening step forward. Outrage spiked through me. "We stopped being a family when you abandoned us." Declan roared and hurled the Jack Daniels bottle. I ducked instinctively and it exploded against the wall, amber liquid raining down. "Don't you dare speak to me that way," he bellowed, spraying spittle. "Ungrateful after everything I did for you." He lunged then. I swung wildly with the bat, the hollow thwack of solid wood connecting with flesh and bone echoing through the chaotic room. Declan stumbled sideways with a garbled shout, crashing into the upended kitchen table. Chest heaving, I clutched the bat in trembling hands. Sick adrenaline flooded my system at having struck him. But the darkened glint in Declan's eyes as he dragged himself upright spurred only stark purpose: protect Elise at all costs. I darted into the hallway, intent on barricading us in my bedroom. But Elise stood frozen outside her room, features white with shock above the rumpled unicorn tee she still hadn't outgrown. Behind me, Declan roared incoherently. "Get back inside," I urged her desperately. She remained rooted in place, tears rising. "Why is Daddy so angry? Why did you hit him?" Her small voice quavered with confusion and fear. I grabbed her shoulders, my own vision blurring fast. "Oh, baby, I'm sorry. Daddy isn't well right now. I had to get her to safety. Everything will be all right, but you need to." Enraged bellowing shredded the rest of my plea. Elise's eyes rounded in dismay a split second before I felt myself airborne. We crashed excruciatingly into the linen closet doors. My head ricocheted off unforgiving drywall and stars exploded across my vision. I slumped in dazed agony, ears ringing. Somewhere through the nauseating haze I heard Elise shrieking. I struggled to sit up, gaping through swelling eye sockets at Declan's hulking form stomping toward my cringing daughter. "No!" I choked out through the inferno raging inside my skull. Elise backpedaled swiftly into her room, but Declan caught her door before it slammed shut. I dragged my leaden body across the carpet, screaming her name. Declan reappeared, massive hand engulfing the back of Elise's neck as she sobbed wildly. "We're leaving!" He spat, face mottled and nose gushing crimson down his scruffy chin. He looked unhinged and dangerous at a cellular level. "Should have come willingly." Through the neighbors' shouting and Elise's hysterical pleas for me, icy resolve solidified, eclipsing everything else. I would not lose my daughter tonight. If stopping Declan meant killing him with my bare hands, then so be it. "Marissa Walsh?" I glanced up from the forms the nurse had given me. 2 officers stood in the doorway, the same pair who'd responded when Declan tried kidnapping Elise. I straightened gingerly. "Yes?" Beside me, Elise eyed them warily from beneath an ice pack as she clutched my hand. "Sorry to intrude. We apprehended your ex attempting to break into your apartment again. He'd managed to pick the back lock. Claims the place still belongs to him." I pressed trembling fingers to my lips, pulse spiking. Elise huddled closer with a whimper. My mouth went dry. "What happens now?" The officers traded looks. "Unfortunately, since his name is still on the lease, we can't charge him with breaking and entering. But we brought him in for the outstanding warrant regarding the assault and attempted kidnapping incident." My knees went loose. No immediate reprieve from Declan's harassment even with him jailed? It wasn't remotely fair or just. I scooped Elise close as she started crying softly. The officers shifted, pained empathy plain on their faces. "We know it's not ideal," the younger one offered quietly, "but our hands are tied legally from keeping him away for good, unless—" His gaze cut to Elise's battered face and anger flashed across his youthful features. "Look, the judge set Declan's bail prohibitively high, and we notified CPS about your daughter's condition, plus the previous child support non-compliance." He hesitated. "I probably shouldn't say this, but we also conducted a thorough search of that apartment after arresting your ex. Let's just state that he won't be making bail anytime soon." A violent tremor ripped through me. Whatever contraband they'd uncovered didn't matter. Only guaranteeing Elise's safety from this monster counted now. I focused dully on the officers' solemn faces. "What should we do? Declan made threats about coming after us again. Can you stop him?" Their grave expressions reflected what I already knew deep down, that the legal system could only constrain someone like my ex-husband for so long. Sooner or later he'd charm his way free again, and next time he might successfully spirit Elise away forever. A bone-deep wariness engulfed me. I'd devoted years to painstakingly rebuilding security for my daughter after Declan's shattering betrayal. Now, despite police intervention and restraining orders, his abuse and manipulation still dominated our lives from behind bars. I tuned back in as the officers offered platitudes about changing the locks and extra patrols near our apartment until Declan's case went to trial. My fingers curled protectively through Elise's baby-fine hair, worthless stopgaps when dealing with a narcissist like my ex. As they left, I kissed Elise's damp cheek, voice unwavering. This ends now, baby girl. Let's go pack. I won't risk him finding us again. Leaving everything familiar behind meant nothing if it secured her safety. I would burn cities to ash first before letting Declan destroy Elise's life further. 6 months later. Name? I met the bored gaze of the station guard evenly. Marissa Walsh, and my daughter Elise. A flicker of interest crossed the woman's face. Message received. She remembered the high-profile case. Sign here. I'll buzz you in. Elise shifted nervously, confusion and curiosity playing across her delicate features beneath summer freckles as we were escorted inside. I gave her a gentle, reassuring squeeze. My heels clicked decisively across the grimy tile, syncing with the thunderous cadence of my pulse. Anticipation and simmering rage kindled with every step nearer to the secure visitation room. Declan's sentencing was today on multiple charges, from kidnapping to possession with intent to distribute. The fastidious search of our old apartment had unveiled a cornucopia of illicit substances and dealings. The officers who'd tipped me off about the contraband discoveries had advised us not to attend the trial given the volatility. But I needed closure. Elise, too, though she didn't fully understand that yet. I'd shielded her these months from Declan's continued threats and maneuverings. Instead, I'd channeled frantic energy into moving us cross-country, into my brother's guest room back east while I slowly rebuilt stability again. But before leaving that chaotic former life forever, Elise and I deserved finality. So I'd made arrangements to see Declan one last time on his way to sentencing, to make certain he grasped the damage inflicted and pain caused were irrevocable, that his poison could never taint our future happiness, if I had any say. The guard ushered us into a small room empty except for a grimy table and plastic chairs. Elise eyed me uncertainly. I managed an encouraging wink just as the door reopened. Flanked by 2 impassive guards, Declan shuffled inside. His contemptuous bravado had evaporated between the damning evidence and prospect of hard time. He seemed diminished in his orange jumpsuit, face at once familiar and that of a defeated stranger. Exactly how I wanted him. I rose slowly. Behind me, Elise fidgeted, anxiety rolling off her. I nodded once at Declan but addressed my daughter gently. It's okay, sweetheart. We're just here to say goodbye before they take him away for a long time. Declan blanched. I skewered him with smoldering satisfaction, letting venom etch my words. Did you want to tell Daddy why we're leaving him forever? When Elise just peered at the floor miserably, I stepped forward, eyes blazing. Well then, let me do the honors. I proceeded to clinically detail every vile deed and repercussion, reveling in Declan's shrinking frame. I spoke Elise's pain, my terror, and destitution. By the end, Declan appeared utterly extinguished. I leaned in, breath hot on his pallid cheek. She's free of you, they both are. I kissed Elise's hair, breathing in her goodness and light, before spinning sharply away. Behind me, Declan sputtered useless protests, truly a master of nothing any longer. I strode into sunshine without a backwards glance, Elise's small hand tucked firmly inside mine.